First, I want to say hello again. And having been in the flying business for something like 78 years, I've got a lot of stories to tell. We also did a lot of air ambulance. And that meant flying live people and also deceased people. And I had a lot of pilots working for me, but none of them wanted to ever fly a deceased person for some reason. I don't know why. It didn't bother me, because I'm from the old school of World War II in Korea. And so I've got some stories here, and Emily has assured me it's okay to put these on. Now, Emily, as you know, is our videographer, our producer, our director, and she is the chief hollerer if I do anything wrong. So we will now proceed. Okay, the first one I call my surfing passenger. A family from here called me to pick up a deceased relative who went down to, I believe in Kentucky. And he passed away, but then never told me how big he was. They said he's a big man, that was it. So I took my usual airplane, and we went down to pick him up in a little town out of Kentucky. Well, when the funeral home drove him out to the airport, pulled up to the airplane, and there were three big guys got out. And I wondered why they had three big guys there, and I knew right away when they brought the body up to the airplane. This guy must have been at least 300 pounds. Now I got a problem. So we really had to fight to get him in. The two big guys on the outside, another guy came in to help me on the inside with the stoop labor, because we're stooping in the airplane and handling the stretcher. We finally get him in, after a lot of sweat. Okay, I checked the weather before I left this little town, and it was raining real hard at Akron. And so showed up, we had an instrument approach into Akron Airport, land, and we're sloshing through water as I taxied up to the gate. The hearse was off to the side. He pulls up to the airplane, and I get out of the airplane. I look, and I knew right away I'm in trouble. The driver was a skinny old man, and his helper was a skinny young man. Boy, this is going to be fun now. There's nobody else around, so we were closed for that day because my operation was in another part of the airport. Nobody else I could get. Okay, so I'm inside the airplane, stooped over, lifting the stretcher, and the young man and the skinny young man, the skinny old man were outside, each handling the stretcher. And of course I had to lift him up like that a bit, as much as I could, because he was a very heavy guy. And the kid slipped, and he fell and when I taxied up to the ramp, we were about 10 feet away from a drain. And the kid went down, fell into the water, got up and yelled, "I quit!" He got back into the hearse. Now, I got the old man struggling. So we got the stretcher out a little bit more, so I started to go outside and help him. And then he slipped and fell into the water. Well, the stretcher, of course, was angled like this coming out of the airplane, the cargo door. And this man, and of course we flew all these people because the families wanted them brought back here to be involved in the whole funeral thing. And so they always wrapped him in a sheet. Well, this guy, heavy guy, he fell out of that angled stretcher and fell onto the water, and for about 10 feet he surfed. He was on top of the water, came down on the grate, and the rushing water held him there. Oh my, now I got problem. Nobody was there, no spectators or anything. I looked around first, thank heaven. So then the young man got out. The old man, skinny old man got up. We finally got him in with much labor into the hearse, and away they went. So now I call that my surfing passenger. So it's not a good thing to have happen, especially trying to pry this guy off of the water drain. And then one night, one afternoon rather, I got a call from a family, and they were Orthodox. So one of their family members, their grandpa, had passed away on a fishing trip in Canada. And the Orthodox, they had to bury before sundown the next day. And they wanted him brought back so that they could bury him according to the religion or whatever. And so I said, weather's terrible, thunderstorms and rain and fog. And I said, it's really going to be a tough. I said, I think we should wait. They said, we can't. We have to bury Grandpa before the sun goes down, which was the next day. So here it was 10 o'clock at night. They wanted me to fly that trip. Well, I know my pilots were not going to fly it, so I flew the trip. We got the gentleman into the airplane, okay, strapped him down, per usual, he's in a sheet. And we're coming back, and the weather was bad. There was just one small thunderstorm after another, rain and hail and bouncing around. And I heard gurgling when I had a quiet stretch there before going into some bad weather again. I looked back, and the sheet was moving a bit, plus a gurgling coming from the sheet. So I leaned back, and I yelled back to the sir, fasten your seatbelt, we're going into rough weather. I go, oh, here I am. That's what I get for flying 7 days a week. Now I'm talking to a deceased guy in my airplane. And we made it through land, everything went okay then. Later I was talking to a mortician friend of mine, he said, oh, it's methane gas. You're probably coming in pretty high. And then also what the rigor mortis, I guess it's rigor mortis or whatever he said, and there are contractions as the muscles go into rigor mortis. And I don't know if that was the right explanation or not, but he was the expert. So here I had telling Commander to, because I thought it hit my, I didn't even think about it. When I saw the sheet move and I heard the gurgling, and I told him to fasten his seatbelt. Well, that's what you get for flying too much, folks. Now there's another one. I went into Kentucky to pick up, again, four relatives. A gentleman who died visited his relatives in Kentucky. It was a small town, and we're waiting. I was gassing up, and I was waiting for the hearse to come out. Well, pickup truck came out, and the guy was in the back of a pickup truck. That was the funeral director for the small town. He also ran the gas station, and also had a garage. He's also a farmer. And he was the coroner also, and the funeral director. So he brought the body out in his pickup truck. And there wasn't any stretcher or anything. He had the guy also in a sheet and on a piece of plywood. Well, there's some helpers there, and we got the guy into the airplane on the my stretcher, and then we tied him down there, and with the seat belts I had installed back there for carrying cargo in the back. And this man, the funeral director, came over, and a couple of guys helped him lift up the body of just a bit, and he took the plywood panel on. He said, they never paid for this plywood. Okay, so he's on our stretcher now. Then he came back again, had these guys unbuckle him from our stretcher, lift him up and take the sheet. Said they never paid for the sheet either. So here I am in this airplane with a gentleman on my stretcher, no clothes, no sheet, no covering, no nothing. So I didn't have a co-pilot on that trip, so I tried to cover him up with charts, my aeronautical charts, which of course would bounce off and all of that. So I had to land up in West Virginia, another small town, and I landed there for gas, and they gave me a credit, or not a credit card, but they gave me a courtesy card to go get lunch. So I came back, I walked into the little terminal building to pay for my gas, and two deputy sheriffs grabbed me. and they handcuffed me and threw me to the floor. And I said, what is going on? They said, and this kid that was supposed to be gassing the airplane came in, he pointed, that's him, that's the murderer. He's got a dead body in there, he killed him. Now he's taking him somewhere and probably throw him off into the water or into the woods somewhere. The kids keep shouting, he's the murderer, he's the guy. The deputy sheriff was serious, pulled me to my feet, and I said, look, it's an air ambulance trip. I'm flying this man home to be buried in Akron. The sheriff came in, I said, look at the front seat, the paperwork is there. So he went, looked at the paperwork, he apologized, they released me. So they thought, for a while, these two deputies thought this is the biggest collar of their life. They caught a guy who was had a dead guy he just murdered. One of the dangers of flying in charter flights like that. And we had an unusual trip because I was flying old military cast-off airplanes for cargo airplanes. And these were all built during World War II. And I bought them real cheap out of the boneyard before they scrapped them out. And they were in perfect condition. And of course, the military, when they give up an airplane, they declare it obsolete, goes to the boneyard, they put a new inspection on it, which about that time, in my shop, we charged $7,000. They also filled the gas tanks and put new tires on them, and in case the military needed them again. Well, then what they were doing, if an agency didn't want the airplane, then they put them up for private sale, and then if they didn't sell them, they scrapped them, chopped them up. Well, I got down there a lot of times. In fact, I had 20 of these airplanes at one time, C-45s, excellent airplanes in perfect condition. And believe it or not, I paid $8,000 a piece after I got my business going. I could afford it, and the banks would loan me money. And they were just great. In fact, we flew for thousands of hours and only had 2 engine problems. And none of them were the airplane's fault. One was the pilot's fault. The other one, the engine had run out of time, or it had to be overhauled. And so I bought one airplane, and I'll remember the number, 9966 Zulu, Z for Zulu. And this airplane had a big cargo door on it. At that time, in those days, it cost about $7,000 to $8,000 to convert an airplane and put a cargo door in, because of a lot of engineering that had to go into it, a lot of paperwork and all. And I still got that for $8,000. So thank you, taxpayers. You gave me an $8,000 gift. And I was buying these airplanes out of the boneyard. They were scheduled to be scrapped. And we took them back, took everything out, seats out, and turned them into freighters. And we flew those things without a mishap, not even an incident, for thousands of hours in my scheduled flights I had out of Youngstown, hauling battery cables and ignition harnesses for General Motors, Packard Electric, and we flew them every night up to the assembly plants in Michigan, Minnesota, and Ohio, wherever they were. And this cargo airplane, 66 Zulu, with the big cargo doors, a good airplane. And we had a lot of business for the airplane. It was very busy, but it is set down in the desert, and it had a brown paint job, which the heat did a job on the paint job. And also flying in bad weather with hail and thunderstorms and icing and everything. A lot of the paint was chipped off. And it was not a pretty airplane, but it was making money. It was flying every day. And I couldn't afford to shut it down for about a $7,000 or $8,000 paint job just to make it look good, because we only flew at night. That airplane occasionally flew during the daytime. Well, what I'm getting to is I got a call from the traffic director, vice president of Firestone Rubber Company. And he was talking very low, like he didn't want anybody in the office to hear him. He says, you have an airplane with a big cargo door? And I said, yes. And what my pilots were telling me about it. And he says, Harvey Firestone, as you know, was a son of founder of Firestone. Well, he passed away. and they had a funeral service for him here in Akron, and they wanted to fly him to Philadelphia and have another service there. Well, I said, okay, there's one problem. He's in a casket. And our jet airplanes here, the doors are not big enough. My pilots told me, call you. And I said, well, we could fit that in there. But he says, I have a few favors to ask, though, if you'll take the trip. I said, okay. He says, bring your airplane over to the Goodyear hangar, and we're going to stick it inside, and we're going to load the casket inside, because I don't want anybody to see your airplane taking Mr. Firestone. We both had a laugh on that. So he said, in Philadelphia, he told me where to go. They'll be waiting for you. For me and the co-pilot of the airplane. And he says, go into this. They'll wave you into the hangar, and there's going to be the hearse inside. So please, they'll take your airplane in, because we don't want anybody to see Mr. Harvey Firestone getting out of your beat-up airplane. And we had another laugh on that. And it was paid very well. But that was one of the most unusual ones. And I used to get calls from this gentleman, because he was traffic manager, and we always had a laugh about that. Well, that's the way things go. You have unusual things like it in many of the charter flights. Well, now let's get on to some lighter stuff here. Oh, here's another one. I think Emily would approve of this one too. That I got a call from a family. They wanted to take Grandpa, fly him back to West Virginia. And I gave them a price, and they says, well, there's two airplanes, single engine airplane cheaper, the twin engine airplane more expensive. They said, well, he's in a casket. I said, well, we can't get him in the single engine airplane. The cargo doors, or the baggage door is not big enough, that opening. And I said, we'll have to use a twin engine airplane. They said, well, we can't afford that. And they said, well, he's a little man, so he's in a small casket. And I said, well, if you want, bring the casket out to the airport, and we'll check the single engine airplane, see if we can get it through the door. So came into the terminal building, and I took him over to the other side of the airplane, and we were using a couple of doors at the D hangar where they used to build the Corsair fighters, and Goodrich had the front end of the building. Yet people could see what was going on in each place. And when the hearse went inside, I told them the hearse has to be done inside. The hearse went inside to our airplane, and that stopped everything in the Goodrich end. Pilots, mechanics, secretaries came out to watch. What's a hearse doing inside the hangar? So the driver takes out the casket, and he says, okay, both of us, he says, and we're fitting it in, and I whispered to him, well, it looks like it'll fit okay. He says, oh, let's have some fun. I said, what do you mean? And he says, well, let me handle this. Gave me a wink, and he yells out, it won't fit. His stomach is popping up too high. So, uh-oh. He put the casket, he said, you help me put the casket down. Because he wanted it to look like it was heavy, and we both were. The casket was empty. So he said, oh, okay. I said, well, we can't do it. He said, I'll fix it. So he starts stomping on this empty casket. Then he says, okay, I stomped him down. Oh, my. And then Pete could hear the woman going, he's okay, and he gets it. It was a terrible scene. I had to hold it in. And he was laughing, got in the hearse, and away he went. And I had to tell the people, it was just an empty casket. He was just being funny. So that got me off the hook on that one. Now, I've got some stories. Well, as I mentioned before, when you fly, you lounges a lot, pilot lounges, you're waiting, either writing, sleeping, drinking coffee, and a lot of stories are going around. And I've heard a lot of stories over the years. I've had a point of just writing them down. And we had one where I heard a general told me this one. Said a friend of his was flying a C-141, and he's going into Washington, or Andrews Air Force Base in Washington. And when he's talking to approach control, he said, "We are hauling experimental animals." And he says, "But we've got a problem. So make sure that we have a priority landing." I'm not declaring an emergency, because every pilot knows you declare an emergency, the paperwork is going to be 2 feet high. So you always say, "Give me priority, be number one to land." He said, approach control said, "What's the problem?" Well, as I mentioned, we're hauling experimental animals, and they broke out of a cage. And he said, "Now we've got 2 monkeys in the cockpit." Approach controller says, "What else is new?" So I hear stories like that completely. Then there's another one. I mentioned this 9966 Zulu that was flying Harvey Firestone. Well, this airplane was used a lot for freight, and a pilot named Gary Nickerson, who now is in that big airfield in the sky, and he's working for somebody else when he died in an airplane crash, but he's a good pilot, and he was flying that 66 Zulu. I was flying my old Lockheed Electra, and we're both hauling auto parts into Flint, Michigan to the Buick factory that is no longer there. And we unloaded, this is just after daybreak, unloaded. We're both taxiing out to return to Akron. Well, Gary is in 66 Zulu was ahead of me, and I was behind him, waiting for our permission. And there's Dogcrap Airlines DC-6, a big 4-engine cargo airplane, was taxiing by us to the active runway. And then he slammed on his brakes. And then he went on to the ground control frequency. He says, "Hey, 66 Zulu, where'd you get that dog crap paint job?" He didn't say dog crap. And Gary, ever the comedian, said, "Well, where do you think of the dog pound? That's where we got it." Then DC-6 taxis out, he takes off, so Gary is given permission to go into position for them to clear him for takeoff. So you know what they said, the tower? They said, "Dogcrap Airlines, 66 Zulu, taxi into position and hold it." Oh, here I'd been working my head off. I just bought a DC-3, and I had visions and ambitions of becoming the next American Airlines. What do I have now? I put my head down on the control column. Now I got Dogcrap Airlines. That was when he was cleared for takeoff. When he took off, and then I was Dogcrap Airlines. They told me to taxi in position and hold that in. Then finally, they're all laughing. The guys in the control tower. Okay, Dogcrap Airlines. 6, you're cleared for takeoff. Thank you, gentlemen. Takeoff, and then departure control. Switched to the departure control. Departure control greeted both of us. "Dogcrap Airlines, you're with departure control. Climb and maintain 8,000 feet. Nickerson says, "Roger, Dogcrap Airlines." And I says, "This is Lockheed 4278. Affirmative." We land, and these guys must have called on the phone to the Akron approach control. What did approach control? And Gary Nickerson says, "Akron can't approach control. This is Dogcrap Airlines 66 Zulu." And from then on, for 2 days, we were referred to as Dogcrap Airlines. Oh, then some inspector got hold of it and canceled, really stopped it with the threat of firing everybody that said it again. Now, this happened also at a joint use air base, and the C-5A is taxiing out. Now, the C-5A, as many of you people know about airplanes, is one of the biggest airplanes that we have in the United States until the C-17 came along. But it was a freight airplane with the nose would open up. It was, and a huge airplane. And the pilot was given permission to taxi out to the active runway, and he's hold short. There's a little Cessna in front of you. So this pilot, an unemployed comedian, he took and opened those huge cargo doors. And when the doors opened like that, the airplane looked like a whale with its doors open. He kind of snuck up a little bit so he wouldn't disturb and he said, "Hey, little Cessna, I'm going to eat you." And he slammed the door shut. So those are the kind of things you hear, and they're great. And of course, I had a short time with Eastern Airlines, going through the pilot training program and all in the 50s, and business was bad, kept getting laid off. So anyway, I flew with the captain. Before I went into the airplane with him, I was warned that this captain he is a good teacher, and he loved to take a new young co-pilot and just tell him everything and instruct him and all that. So I'm with this captain, really grizzled looking old guy, looked like he'd been flying for 200 years, and he had a scowl on his face. He does the takeoff, levels off. On the takeoff, he then gives his commands to the co-pilot. So hand commands. He goes, "Gear up." That's the landing gear up signal. Flaps up, he gives that signal. He says, "Shut up, go get me some coffee." Gear up, flaps up, shut up, go get me coffee. And that was kind of startling because I was asking him questions. So that was the way he loved to do it. Now, there's a friend of mine, he's deceased now. He was wound up as a captain with United Airlines. And the older pilots also liked to play tricks. And they had good victims in young, eager co-pilots and in new flight attendants. And they had a lot of things that Don was telling me about this one. When he got out of pilot training, he was assigned to this captain. Well, right away, the other captains in the dispatch room told him, "Look, when you fly with Joe," he says, "you've got to be real crisp. Be quiet. Don't ask him anything. Real crisp in any questions, and obey every command he gives you," which you had to do anyway. And he says, "Whatever he tells you, you better snap to it right away, or he will start yelling at you." So Don Kariskas tells me he was sweating when he got into the co-pilot, looked at that captain, and sure enough, he was a mean-looking guy. And he says, "Okay, I'm going to do my best, because if you don't, well, the captain, he can write you up, and then you're out." Well, this captain, once he got leveled off, put the airplane on autopilot. He's, "Okay, Don, stand up." Well, Don was a short guy, and he couldn't stand up all the way in the cockpit. He said, "Turn around." So he turned around. He's unfastened. He says, "Now, what I want you to do is put your head down on the seat. Be upside down." And Don said he did it. He didn't know what the guy wanted to do. Then the captain unfastened his seat belt. He got up and face down on his seat. Then he hit the call button for the flight attendant. She came rushing in there. She saw them sitting upside down in their seats. The captain yells, "Tell the passengers, buckle up, we're upside down." That's one of the tricks they play on these people. In fact, I heard another story about, this happened years ago, when the Blue Angels were still flying piston airplanes. And there was an admiral that didn't fly very much. The admirals flew very little. They just flew about 4 hours a month to get their flight pay. So they were in a PBY, a patrol bomber, a twin-engine, a big airplane that was used extensively in World War II and after. And the admiral wanted to fly the airplane. Well, the young co-pilot was a little bit nervous about that because the admiral, you have to obey him, but the admiral was not current in the airplane. So he's okay, it's a clear day. Then what happens, some Blue Angels, a flight of 5 Blue Angels, were in a loose formation, and they were catching up with this PBY. And the leader of the Blue Angels said, okay, you guys, upside down. The whole flight went upside down. And they slowed up to go by this. Well, then the young co-pilot had to go back to the job, the rear of the airplane. So he's back in the toilet. And this admiral saw these airplanes close by, going by upside down. And the admiral thought he was upside down, so he tried to roll the airplane over upside down. This poor young ensign came running out of there, trying to get dressed to right the airplane. And that admiral was furious. He tried to find the name of the guys. He's going to court-martial him. He's going to do this. He's going to do. Nobody would give him a hint of who was flying those airplanes. Those are the funny things that happened. And then, of course, I've had some funny things. My son, youngest son, Michael, he was very interested in the flying business, and we're going back to the airport. And he said, I'm going to drive. I said, well, I'll drive. No, you're not going to drive. Then we were tooling along, and he's saying to me, you know, Dad, one of these days, we're going to have to ask for your keys. And I says, okay. He said, doesn't that bother you? I says, well, no. He says, why? He's puzzled. I said, I'll go back to flying. He says, oh my God, keep your keys. Well, so long. We'll see you again next week. And I hope you're enjoying the stories from the old pilot.